What's up, my wizards? It's Dev. SBMTG, we like magic, all that stuff. And today we're going to look through the red cards from the Dominaria League. In case you're just joining us, we've actually already done all the white, blue, and black cards. I'll leave links in the description for those if you're interested. But got to get the show on the road because they actually previewed more red cards than they did any other color. And, you know, a lot of them are draft chaff, limited fodder. So consequently, this may actually go faster than usual, but it doesn't mean there's not a lot of really cool stuff to talk about. Case in point, first Planeswalker that we've run across in this series. Here's Jaya Ballard. Good hype for Granny B. She's 5 mana, 2 and 3 red for a 5 loyalty Planeswalker. Not bad. Her first +1 ability is that she'll add 3 red to your mana pool, but you can only spend it on instants and sorceries. She's got another +1 though, don't worry. You discard up to 3 cards, and then you draw that many cards. And her -8, her ultimate is you get an emblem with you may cast instant and sorcery cards from your graveyard, and if you cast cards that way, you gotta exile them. So her ultimate is she gives every card in your, or every instant and sorcery in your graveyard flashback. That is very good, especially considering she doesn't have any minus abilities. You know, you can +1 her a few times, and any instants or sorceries that you happen to discard to her own ability, you just get to cast again. So if you can get this to ultimate, there's actually a form of card advantage you can get out of it, because you drew a bunch of cards. But if you can cast the cards you discarded, it's kind of like you never discarded them at all. So you can get her to ultimate. She is super hype. And her +1 is good too. You know, it's on turn 5 you can cast her and still have mana up for all manner of shenanigans. You know, and put a loyalty counter on her. You know, the first turn she's in play, let's just say turn 5, a 6 loyalty Planeswalker is no joke. That's really high. But, you know, I can't just talk about what's awesome about the card forever. There's also the fact that Glorybringer is in the format right now, and you got to wonder which one is the better card. Glorybringer does rotate in the fall, so there's that to look forward to, and maybe Granny will get better after Glorybringer rotates. I don't know how many 5-drops you want to play. You also have to evaluate it the way that we are used to evaluating Planeswalkers, so you have to ask the question, does it protect itself? No. You know, it doesn't, you know, remove creatures. It doesn't create creatures. So, and it feels weird for a red Planeswalker, especially one with 3 red. That is a red Planeswalker. It feels weird for that Planeswalker to not be able to kill creatures. Well, it's kind of strange. You could argue that she does kind of protect herself with her high loyalty. That's one way. And the fact that you can play her on turn 5 and still have mana for a removal spell if you +1 her. So in that way, she kind of protects herself too. But she is, you gotta point out the fact that traditionally this would not be viewed as an amazing Planeswalker. But I think the card advantage is so real, and even the ramp is so real. You know, the next turn you can really play any of these like crazy, ridiculous, you know, 7 mana instants and sorceries they want to print in every set. And it's very real. You can actually play them if you get a Jaya down on turn 5. So there's some cool stuff about her. She does have to survive. Usually you're probably going to have a team around her to block for her. But that shouldn't be too hard to do, honestly. So I like a lot about this. I think it will at some point see play, even if it has to wait on Glorybringer to rotate. There's probably cool stuff we can do with this. Now, Jaya herself might not be able to kill creatures, but she does get a spell named after her that's quite good at killing creatures. This is Jaya's Immolating Inferno. It's 2 red and X for a legendary sorcery. Jaya's Immolating Inferno deals X damage to each of up to 3 targets. Well, this is great to play after a Jaya, obviously, and it's really great to play after a Chandra. That's especially good. It actually shouldn't be too tough to have a legendary permanent out late in the game. So this is probably just a 1 or 2 of in some decks, but you know, when you follow up a Chandra or a Jaya with it, it is a dangerous spell that is either going to wipe the board or at least give you tons of board advantage at the very least. So I'm not going to say the card is incredible, but I will say the text on the card is unbelievable. So I would not put it past seeing play. But we do have to move on here. Here's Goblin Chainwhirler. I've actually seen some people really hyped about this card. This is 3 red mana. It's part of this cycle. It's a 3/3 first strike Goblin Warrior, and when it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. That's kind of good. I suspect, though, that this is a sideboard card against token strategies and Whirler Virtuoso and other strategies that tend to pump out a bunch of creatures. And this, too, seems okay against, like, Llanowar Elves. Although by the time you cast Chainwhirler, even if you're on the play, they've gotten the value they wanted out of Lawn Orals. So I'm not sure how relevant that is. But, you know, there's a ton of X1s that this could probably kill right now if you were gonna build a mono red aggro deck, which is already a great deck. I'm just not sure this is a better 3-drop than the other stuff the deck is playing. You know, obviously the deck plays on Crop Crasher, and it's lately, well, for a good long time now, really, been playing a couple of copies of PNA Lar. This might possibly be better for that deck than PNA Lar is. So, well, maybe, possibly. But I wouldn't guarantee it, especially mainboard play. This could see sideboard play all day, though. Absolutely could see sideboard play. And it's a meaty enough creature with a relevant ability, too. First strike on a 3-power dude actually means a lot. So I'm intrigued, but I see it more of a sideboard card than a main deck card. But we are going to move on here to Siege Gang Commander. This is the first of a few reprints we're about to look at. It's back, y'all. Siege Gang Commander. And it's probably not as good as it used to be, again, especially in a format with Glorybringer. But I'll read it to you in case you didn't play Magic forever ago. Siege Gang Commander is 5 mana, 3 and 2 red for a 2/2 goblin. When it enters the battlefield, put 3 1/1 red goblin creature tokens onto the battlefield. And you can pay 1 and a red and sack a goblin to have Commander deal 2 damage to target creature or player. It still reads fantastically. You know, not only can you sacrifice one of its tokens to deal 2 to shock a target, you can sacrifice it. You can sacrifice any other goblin. That is so good. Siege Gang was always great reach. It's a board in a box. It's a great way to recover from a sweeper the turn before. There's just so many awesome things about Siege Gang. In formats where you can blink it, it's crazy. We have Panharmonicon in this format. There's a lot of possibilities for Siege Gang. You know, getting 4 bodies for 5 mana is just crazy. Even in a format with Glorybringer, that might be good enough. You know, a board in a box is always nice. So I like Siege Gang. And I'm not saying that like goblins is definitely going to be a thing. Although it did get sort of a lord. We'll get to that in just a second. But we'll have to see more goblins before goblins is real. But this has always been a classic mid-range card that does everything mid-range wants to do. You know, it's reach. That can't be disregarded. You know, it gives you 4 bodies, all the power, you know, 5 power for 5 mana, split among tons of bodies, really hard to block, tough to deal with, forces sweepers, just Siege Gang is the dope, you guys, and I'm pretty sure that it still is. But if it has to wait for Glorybringer to rotate, so be it. It's still a strong looking card to this day. But next up, we're going to look at another reprint. Here's Skizik. Skizik is back, you guys. I fully expected Ball Lightning, but we got Skizik instead. It's 4 mana, 3 and a red for a 5/3 elemental. You kick it for just 1 red. And it's got Trample and Haste. At the end of your turn, sacrifice Skizik unless the kicker cost was paid. Now, here's why I'm excited about Skizik. People have always asked every time I ever do a deck with Hazoret the Fervent in it. People ask me what's a good budget option for Hazoret, which may not even be much of a concern for much longer, because the Challenger decks, I hope, are going to drive down the price of Hazoret to manageable levels. But just in case they don't, or in case you really want to build a very budget mono red deck, Skizik might be a great choice for you, because this is a decent replacement for Hazoret. You know, it's still a 4 mana, 5 power, you know, haste guy. And if you want to pay the extra mana for it, then it doesn't go away until they can remove it somehow. And that's not bad. I mean, I used to suggest Fleetwheel Cruiser as your, you know, Hazoret alternative, but I think this is probably better than Cruiser in most cases. Not all, but most cases. So I like that Skizik's here, if only because we have a decent budget alternative to a card like Hazoret. So welcome back, Skizik. You're not what you used to be. And to be honest, when Skizik first came out, a lot of people freaked out about it, but it still wasn't the best creature ever. It was in mono red aggro. It was a very important piece, but it wasn't, you know, the next coming of Ball Lightning like we wanted it to be. And it isn't here either, but there's at least one cool application in Standard for it. Don't have the dough for Hazoret, play this thing. So I like that. But up next, here's the last reprint, and it's that Goblin Warlord I was talking, or the Goblin Lord I was talking about. Here's Goblin Warchief. Interesting that they didn't give us a goblin that is an anthem effect. This is still very, very relevant. It's 3 mana, 1 and 2 red for 2/2 goblin. And goblin spells you play cost 1 less to play. And goblins you control have haste. Now, this is still good for all the reasons it was always good. You know, there's a couple of things you could do with this in the upcoming standard, potentially, at least. You know, it's always turn 3 Goblin Warchief, and then turn 4 you have the option of just going off and playing like 4 goblins, all with haste and just swinging in. Or, in the upcoming standard, you could play Siege Gang Commander on turn 4, a turn early. With Warchief, and they all have haste too, so that seems pretty ridiculous. So I think Warchief is still awesome, and once we get more goblins, and then, you know, again, we haven't seen more than 100 cards from this set, so there probably will be more goblins to play around with, and, you know, core set will definitely have some goblins. I think that's almost a slam dunk. So we will get more goblins while this card's in standard to play around with, and at some point, hopefully, it is what it's supposed to be. But right now, I don't think it's there yet. Anyway, here's a goblin. Here's a goblin. Here's Squee, the Immortal. Hey, buddy, you're still around. Makes sense, he's immortal. But anyway, 3 mana, 1 and 2 red for a 2/1 goblin. He's legendary, and you can cast him from your graveyard or from exile. So Squee just really doesn't ever go away. And I think that is pretty valuable. This is probably another sideboard card if it sees any play at all. It feels kind of like a joke, but you cannot discount this card. It's almost a reprint, but in a lot of ways even better than the original. And the original sees a lot of like commander shenanigans and stuff. And this will probably see some as well, because you can just keep casting it over and over after you sacrifice it. I mean, there's plenty of fun stuff you can do with Squee, but as far as, you know, standard constructed play, it doesn't look amazing to me, but you just can't discount a creature that's impossible to get rid of. You can't. So, maybe possibly, but commander players, enjoy your shenanigans. I'll just say that. This next card, though, is Gitu Lavamancer. I believe that's right, although it's confusing because the text says Gitu Lava Runner. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But it's just 1 red mana for a 1/2 human wizard, and as long as there are 2 or more instant and or sorcery cards in your graveyard, it gets +1/+0 and has haste. This is tough to evaluate. It's never going to be good on turn 1, unless you can somehow engineer a situation where for no mana you discard a couple of instants or sorceries. I don't know. But it's almost never going to be good on turn 1, but it might potentially be good starting turn 3. If you can get it to be good starting turn 3, I think you've got a decent creature here, but only decent. You know, a 1 mana 2/2 haste would be incredibly push, one of the best 1 mana creatures of all time, if not the best. If we could play it on turn 1, having to wait until turn 3 or 4 really mitigates how good this card could possibly be. So I think it does go in the Blue-Red Wizards deck. We don't know exactly what that deck looks like right now. I mean, I've been brewing with it. I'm sure other people have been too. And it's got options, but, you know, it's sort of looking like the deck has to play Lavamancer now rather than wanting to play Lavamancer. Let me just put it that way. So I think the card is decent, but we'll have to, time will tell whether this card is amazing. And again, we might have to wait until the format's a little bit more full with core set in it to see a card like this really shine. But I'm looking forward to it if it does. But up next, here's Rampaging Cyclops. Here's some of that draft filler I was talking about. It's 4 mana, 3 and a red for a 4/4 Cyclops. And it gets -2/-0 as long as 2 or more creatures are blocking it. Hilarious flavor. It's only got the 1 eye, so if 2 guys are blocking it, it can't see both. That's hilarious. But aside from that, 4 mana 4/4, you might play that. You might play that in limited. Although double blocks are relatively common on big creatures, and this is very bad when it gets double blocked. So I'm not even 100% sure about that. But, you know, if it's between this and a crap spell, you'll probably play the 4/4 body instead. So there's at least that. But up next is Warlord's Fury. This is just 1 red mana for a sorcery. Creatures you control gain first strike until end of turn. Draw a card. This should be an instant, right? It would probably cost an extra mana, but this really should be a combat trick, in which case it could be a blowout, a definite blowout. But when your opponent sees it coming, it's nowhere near as good. But at least it cantrips or whatever, draws a card. We are at a point where we're at a critical mass with cards like this in Standard. So if you just wanted to load up your deck with red and blue cards that draw a card for 1 mana, you totally could do that. So maybe this is a small key in a big lock. We'll see. But up next is a card I really like. This is Valduk, Keeper of the Flame. It's 3 mana. That's 2 and a red for a 3/2 legendary human shaman. It really needs to be a wizard, but it's not. At the beginning of combat on your turn, for each aura and equipment attached to Valduk, create a 3/1 red elemental creature token with trample and haste. Exile the tokens at the beginning of the next end step. Now this is really cool, and I like the sort of the way it plays because you don't necessarily have to run it in to get, you don't have to attack with it. It's just at the beginning of combat on your turn, this happens, and that's pretty freaking sweet, you know. And there's a couple of equipments that work kind of well with this right now. There's Shield of the Realms, which is in this set. It's like if a source would deal damage, you can read it, it's right there on your screen. If a source would deal damage to an equipped creature, prevent 2 of it. That's a way to protect him. That I actually quite like a good bit. And there's a few other things. I guess Sorcerer's Wand, you can read that there too. You don't have to attack with him, but he can still do damage. This is one of the reasons he needs to be a wizard. But there's all manner of decent, you know, equipments and auras and stuff that you can use to protect this dude so they can't kill him. You know, there's the blue thing that gives the thing hexproof, and if it dies, you draw 2 cards. So there's stuff. There's stuff. And you could just make it to where, you know, you have an army of 3/1s every single turn. I mean, I think this is a really cool commander for what it's worth, too. I think this is a really fun commander to build around. But I am sort of interested in a standard deck with this because there's no shortage of auras. Definitely. I mean, there's sort of a shortage of equipment, but there is no shortage of auras whatsoever. So I could definitely see this seeing some play. Or at least it will on this channel. There is going to be a budget Valduk deck because that looks sweet. The Mighty Valduk. The Mighty Valduk. But we got to move on at some point. I can't gush about a maybe bad card that I just really like for too long. Up next is Goblin Barrage. It's 4 mana, 3 and a red for a sorcery with kicker. You can sacrifice an artifact or a goblin. And then it deals 4 damage to target creature. If the spell was kicked, it also deals 4 damage to target player or planeswalker. That's actually kind of cool. It's no shrapnel blast, obviously, but it's still pretty sweet, you know. It does a lot of the stuff Shrapnel Blast does and gives you more sacrifice options. So, I don't know. It's neat. Costs a lot of mana. Sorcery speed, whatever. I still think that it's kind of nice. You know, again, I don't think this is going to see all the play. But at the very least, you don't have to sacrifice anything, and you can kill a creature. Most creatures in Limited. Sees all the Limited play in the world. But also in Limited, this has the option of being a great card for Goblin decks or Artifact decks or anything like that. So I think this has a ton of interesting Limited, not necessarily build around, but go in application. And even in Standard, I think this is an interesting piece of reach for some decks, but it's probably not going to see any actual Standard play. So I'll move on to Keldon Warcaller. This is 2 mana. It's 1 and a red for a 2/2 human warrior. With, whenever Keldon Warcaller attacks, you put a lore counter on a saga you control. Well, obviously, this is for like budget saga decks and stuff. I don't think there are any sagas we've seen that are strong enough to like demand playing this card right now. Like, unless you really want to make the Black Wrath go off the turn that you play it, I don't see a ton of, you know, just standard breaking applications with Keldon Warcaller. It's more for limited play than anything else, but if we're building a budget saga deck that includes red, it's probably a 4 of inclusion, so it may live on in infamy for that reason, if no other. But I'll go ahead and move on here. We don't have to talk too much about that. This is Haphazard Bombardment. It's 6 mana, 5 and a red for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, choose 4 non-enchantment permanents you don't control and put an aim counter on each of them. At the beginning of your end step, if 2 or more permanents you don't control have an aim counter on them, destroy one of those permanents at random. This card is very bad. This card is one of the worst cards that I've read so far. And I know, I get it, this is removal. It's even a 2-for-1. So if you do get this in Limited, if you get this in your sealed pool, you'll probably play it because it will kill at least 2 things. But it doesn't do that until very, very late in the game. You don't even get to choose what it kills. It doesn't even kill all the things that you put an aim counter on. And as a matter of fact, aim counter is... I know that Haphazard Bombardment, haha, that's the joke here, that's the flavor. But still, aim counter is an ironic name, considering you're not actually aiming at anything. Or your aim isn't very good, at the very least. So, I just hate an awful lot about this card, other than the fun factor. And yeah, again, it's probably at least playable in sealed. It's not a junk rare there, but it's a junk rare pretty much everywhere else, and I hate it. So there's that. But we'll move on to Warcry Phoenix. This is 4 mana, 3 into red for a 2/2 Phoenix with flying and haste. That's not bad. Whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, you may pay 2 in a red. If you do, return Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped and attacking. Okay. All right. This, not terrible, right? I'm not actually sure. 4 mana is so much. A 2/2 flying haste, that's not the worst thing ever. But 4 mana is a lot, especially considering what else we're spending 4 mana on. In this format, there's a much better Phoenix for 4 mana, first of all. And there's Hazaret. There's just a ton of stuff. And this can be binding or cast out or Vraska's Contempted, just like all the other creatures I just mentioned. But there's still a consideration. You never get the value out of this that you want. And if you're going to take that chance, I just think that there's a myriad of other creatures that you could use aside from Warcry. Unless I'm just totally wrong and off base here and it's actually amazing, but I doubt it, especially considering to enable it, you got to be swinging with 3 guys. And if you're doing that, then you're probably doing okay in the game regardless. So we're going to move on to Fight with Fire, which I always want to call Fight Fire with Fire. That's very awkward. But Fight with Fire is 3 mana, 2 in a red for a sorcery with kicker 6. That's 5 in a red. And Fight with Fire deals 5 damage to target creature. If it was kicked, though, it deals 10 damage divided as you choose among any number of targets instead. So it's entirely possible to, at least the way it's worded here, just hit your opponent right to the top of the dumb head for 10 damage if you have 9 mana, which I guess you could. If you were devoted to having 9 mana, there are ways of doing it. Treasure, Brass's Bounty, 2 different Planeswalkers when this set comes out that produce mana, Hour of Promise. There are ways to get to 9 mana if you're dedicated enough, and this is Reach. This is the very definition of Reach. And even if you can't kick it, it's 3 mana. Yeah, at sorcery speed, that really hurts. But it is 3 mana to kill just about any creature, including the new Baneslayer. This might actually be relevant for that reason, if only that reason. But kicking it, if you can pull it off, pretty nice. You're either wrathing the board or you're killing, 4 dudes and dealing a couple of leftover damage to your opponent. I think this is actually not terrible, although 9 mana is Christmas land for most decks. So we got to take that into consideration. But even if you don't, I like that about it. If you get super late in the game, this is just a nuke. This is just in the game right now when you top deck it very late in a long game. But even if you never get to the point in the game where you're going to go that long, it's still fairly reliable, splashable even, removal. So I kind of like it. And it goes without saying that in Limited, you'll play this every time you ever get it. So there's that too. But I'm not saying it has no chance in Standard. I think it might actually, depending on what kind of mana production we actually see going on here. But I'm going to move on to get to Journey Mage. This is 3 mana, 2 in a red for a 3/2 human wizard. And when it enters the battlefield, if you control another wizard, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. Now, I want to like this, but there's actually been a couple of creatures that we've seen in the fairly recent past that do something like this. When Battle for Zendikar came out, it was like a 3 mana black creature with Devoid, and if you controlled something else that was colorless and it dealt 2 damage to an opponent, I think it had the same stats and everything. It's just that sees no play at all. So even though we're evaluating the blue-red Wizards deck right now and seeing how good that's going to be, I'm not sure this goes in at the end of the day. Unless all that deck is trying to do is push through damage as fast as possible, which it might be. I'm not putting that past it. This probably won't see a ton of play, but the stats are okay. 3 mana, 3/2. It's not the worst thing in the world. And it's worth noting that there are wizards in mono red decks already in a Soulscar Mage and a couple of others. So, maybe. I'm not saying this is awful, but I am saying that there's probably going to be better choices at the end of the day. Like this card. Here's Wizard's Lightning. It's 3 mana, 2 in a red for an instant. You've probably read, everyone's heard of this card, so it's 2 in a red for an instant, but it costs 2 less to cast if you control a wizard, in which case it just becomes a lightning bolt because it does 3 damage to a target. That's not bad. It's instantly way better than Open Fire in Standard, right? And in Modern, it might be another Lightning Bolt. You know, copies 5 through 8 of Lightning Bolt in your deck that's trying to abuse Snapcaster Mage. So there's a maybe, possibly. I actually think I like it better than its analog in blue, the Counterspell. That's a cancel, but it becomes a counterspell if you control a wizard. This is Open Fire, but it becomes Lightning Bolt if you control a wizard, and that is probably very, very good, especially considering the blue-red Wizards deck. From what we know about it so far, is it Wizards doesn't necessarily want to hold up a ton of mana in the early game. It might want that Wizard counterspell on turn 4 or 5, where it can, play a 2 or 3 mana play and still hold up the mana for it. So it might want to play it. But it definitely wants to play this card. There is no argument. You have got to play 4 copies of Wizard's Lightning if you're playing the blue-red Wizards deck. And there's just no way to argue that. So, yeah, I'm super excited about this. Even if it only sees play in blue-red Wizards and there's just no other deck that wants it ever, I'm totally fine with that. It may make blue-red Wizards a real deck just by itself. So, yeah. Yeah, super hype about that. But anyway, next, might as well move on. I mean, everyone knows that card's good. How much can you really say about it? But we'll move on to Keldon Overseer. It's 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 3/1 human warrior. And you can kick it for 3 and a red. So that's 7 mana in total. But it does have haste. And when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you gain control of target creature until end of turn, untap it, and that creature gains haste until end of turn. So for 4 mana, you staple a threaten effect or hijack effect or whatever you call them, onto this card, and 7 mana is too much. 7 mana is too much. We had, Eldrazi Obligator, which saw pretty fair common sideboard play a couple of formats ago. This I don't think is quite as good as that, although I really am digging a 3 mana 3/1 haste. That could be worse, but it could be better too. Really wouldn't mind an extra point of toughness on this guy, but at least it's got the haste. And when you do kick it, you'll have, a haste guy and whatever creature you steal swinging. So it's not terrible, but I don't think it's easy standard play. That, again, is just priced way out of the market. And for all the other dumb 7-8 mana stuff that we've covered in this set and that already exists in standard, you've probably got way more options to spend that much mana. So I don't like it. But we'll move on to Radiant Lightning. It's 4 mana, 3 and a red for an instant. It deals 3 damage to target player and 1 damage to each creature that player controls. I like this card a lot too. Again, as a sideboard option though. But it doesn't necessarily have to be in the sideboard because it's always going to do something. It's always going to be 4 mana for 3 damage to them, which probably isn't good enough for main board play. But I guess if you're trying to defeat a tokens deck in standard, or they're just playing a bunch of X1s or whatever, or maybe they got Whirler Virtuoso and they're going hard on it, a card like this is very, very good in those situations. We may have better options for dealing with those boards in standard, but at the very least, this is reach. It has the opportunity. Look at it this way: it has the opportunity to be an unlicensed disintegration that gets 3 creatures off of the board for you. So that could be good, but I just don't think that's going to happen often enough to carry it at all. In the 75. But I'll move on to Bloodstone Goblin. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 2/2 Goblin Warrior. Whenever you cast a spell, if that spell was kicked, then Goblin gets +1/+1 and gains menace until end of turn. Whatever. This is, again, playable and limited if you've got a deck that has 3 or 4 cards with kicker in it. But in this set, at least from what we've seen so far, the kicker costs are insanely high on a lot of these, and I just don't know how worth it this card is. But it is a decent filler creature in draft. It's a bear, 2 mana, 2/2, in red. It's got a relevant creature type, so it's not going to be terrible, ever, in limited. Decent 23rd creature if you're looking for that, if you're looking for an extra body. And there's some possible extra value on it. So I don't think the card's bad, but I don't think it sees standard play. But at least with the suite of kicker cards we've seen so far, I doubt it. So we'll move on to a card that I've seen no hype about. Literally no hype about this card, but I actually think I might like this a lot. This is the First Eruption. It's 3 mana, 2 and a red for an enchantment. It's a saga. When it gets its first lore counter, turn it enters the battlefield, it'll deal 1 damage to each creature without flying. Second turn, it gets a lore counter. You add 2 red to your mana pool. Third turn, it's out. You sack a mountain. If you do, first eruption deals 3 to each creature. Now, on curve, I think this might be okay, especially against certain decks, but this is a good ramp piece in its own right. You know, I'd say that some decks might want this over Gift of Paradise, and ramp decks play Gift of Paradise. Sometimes you can kill a creature or 2, but even if you kill 1 creature, and only 1 creature, the first turn you play this, it's actually done its job. The next turn it's in play, you can play a 6-drop creature on that turn if you get a land. That's amazing. Or you can play a Chandra and have mana left over to do something else. Hold up for a removal spell. You can even play a Jaya, play a Jaya Ballard if you wanted to. On your next turn, after first eruption. That is so good, without even playing a land. It is really good, and the ability to get a big play on like that on turn 4 mitigates the damage that sacrificing a mountain does on the next turn. But when you do sack that mountain on turn 5, then you'll get a small-scale Wrath, which could be great if you did play a Planeswalker the last turn. You know, that helps protect your Planeswalker or whatever big play you made on turn 4. I actually think this is really, really sweet, and there's probably a ton of stuff you can do with it, if only because it's a decent ramp piece. But it's a ramp piece that also removes creatures, which is exactly what ramp wants. You know, so yeah, this actually, I'm calling it, we'll probably see some play. But can't talk about it all day. I'm just the only one talking about it, so I wanted to give it a moment of spotlight there. But anyway, we're going to move on to Varric's Bladewing here. It's 4 mana, 2 and 2 red for a 4/4 legendary dragon with kicker 3. It's got flying. And when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you create Karok's Bloodwing, a legendary 4/4 red dragon creature with flying. So it's sort of double dragon again, you know, the second coming of Broodmate. That's pretty awesome. This is a nostalgic callback that I'm not sure how much I love. A 4 mana 4/4 flying is at least okay. Well, it's at least okay in this format. And it can't be killed by a Glorybringer. It will block and trade with Glorybringer, but it can't be shot down by Glorybringer's Exert trigger. So that's at least something right there. It can be killed by push, but they have to revolt it. So, I don't know. I like it. I think that if you do get to the 7 mana, it's unbelievable. But again, there's a question of would you rather be doing other stuff with 7 mana? In this case, I'm not sure. I think that for 7 mana, 2 4/4 flyers is probably where you want to be. So, I actually like this card a lot. I think it might see some play, but it's only going to be in ramp decks and stuff like that. I really don't think it sees play outside of those. But it's worth noting that Chandra can help ramp you into the kicker if you need her to. So that might be relevant too. And we just saw a card that also helps ramp. So, you know, there's definitely ways to get to this much earlier than you have any business getting to it. And if that's the case, the card could be really, really good. I am tempted to just be like, the card's bad. Because it's really slow. If you want to get real value out of it, it's really slow. But it's flexible. You know, even in games of competitive Magic, there's going to be plenty of times where you'll take a 4 mana 4/4 flyer. You'll take that in many, many situations in real time. And later on in the game, if you top deck this on turn 10, then you'll also definitely take 2 4/4 flyers. That's a really tough play for your opponent to get out from behind of. So I think it's real. I think it could easily be real, guys. But we're going to move on. So we've only got a couple more cards to talk about here, and they're not amazing. But don't click away just yet. Here's the Flame of Keld. It's 2 mana, 1 and a red for a saga. First lore counter, turn it enters the battlefield, you discard your hand. Second lore counter, second turn it's in play, you draw 2 cards. Okay. And then you put the third lore counter on it, the third turn it's in play, you sacrifice it. If a red source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player this turn, it deals that much damage +2 to that permanent or player instead. Okay, not amazing, but at least worth considering. There's a lot of really cool stuff about this card, especially in mono red, where with the turn you play it, you probably won't have much of a hand to discard in the first place if you're playing your cards right. But that also makes it a 2 mana do nothing enchantment. I guess the good thing about that is that if you wait to play this on turn 5, you'll have no other cards in your hand, and you'll have been able to make another play on that turn. You can double spell. essentially. So I could see situations where this could be okay because the next turn you get 3 cards. You get 2 from this and then 1 from your draw step. And that's a great refill for only 2 mana. And then if you can make it till the next turn, which isn't even that far off, just 2 turns after you play this, you get the chance to have, your Lightning Strike still 6, your Shock still 4, and that's, your Lightning Strike still 5, and your Shock still 4. And that could be really good for finishing off a game. If you've got a Lightning Strike and a Shock in your hand, well, that's a ton of damage, friend. So I think that there are applications for this that are really interesting. I'm not discounting it at all. If you can play it in a situation where you have no other cards in hand and you draw a bunch of cards next turn off of it, I think that's actually really, really good. Very interesting card here, so we'll see. Again, this is one of those where I don't think it definitely sees play, but I cannot say that it absolutely won't. The card is not garbage. This next card, however, is not, it's not garbage, but it's probably limited to limited. This is Fire Fist Adept. It's the final card of the day. It's 5 mana, 4 and a red for a 3/3 human wizard, relevant creature type. When Fire Fist Adept enters the battlefield, it deals X damage to target creature an opponent controls, or X is the number of wizards you control. All right, so that's obviously fantastic. In limited, it's at least going to deal 1 damage to a creature, which isn't great, but if you have at least 1 other wizard out, which isn't too much to ask by the time you get to 5 mana, if you have 1 other wizard out, it's probably going to kill something if you're in a limited game. If you have 2 other creatures out, it is definitely going to kill something like 100% of the time. So this isn't too bad as a curve topper in limited, or if you're drafting up the blue-red wizards deck, or even the mono-red wizards deck. This is not a bad inclusion, but it will see the light of day nowhere other than in limited. This is way too much to see standard play, I would imagine. And believe it or not, that is all of the red cards. Let me know how you feel about all of these. Let me know what interactions and combos and stuff I missed. If I did any, I'm sure I did. So let me know if I screwed anything up. That's always important too. So just talk to me down there in the comments section, because there's a lot to talk about. You can also click the first link in the description if you want to check out my sponsor, TCG Player. They help keep the channel going, and you can order Dominaria product from them for super cheap, and they have all these individual cards, most of them at least, with pre-order options right now, so you can at least get a feel for what the prices are right this second while people are speculating. That's an interesting thing to do, so click the link in the description, help them out, and help the channel out just by clicking the link. You can also like the video if you like the video, follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev, or throw me $1 a month on Patreon, link in the description for that if you want to. Also, sub if you're new, because you want the rest of this content. Not only do we have green and the gold cards and the artifacts and colors stuff to go through, but after that, it's time for some brewing. We got to brew some stuff up with these cards. So you want to be around for all that, sub, hit the bell for the notifications, do all that stuff, help the channel out, and I will catch you cats later. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.